An Arab millionaire forced his son to marry a cleaning lady. The family laughed at him non-stop. But 1 year later, everyone was left speechless with what he ended up doing. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the marble floors of the Hassan mansion, where Amira Martinez methodically pushed her cleaning cart through the sprawling corridors. At 24, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned early in life that hard work was the only path forward. Her dark hair was neatly tied back, and her uniform, though worn, was impeccably clean, a detail that hadn't escaped the notice of her employer, Karim Hassan. From his study window, Karim watched her work, while his mind churned with worry. The latest video of his son Zayn's escapades at a Miami nightclub had just hit the tabloids. The young man had been caught on camera throwing money into a crowd and dancing on tables, making a spectacle of himself and the Hassan family name. It was the third such incident this month, and Karim's patience was wearing thin. The contrast between Amira's dedicated work ethic and his son's reckless behavior couldn't have been more stark. He'd observed how she took extra shifts to help pay for her mother's medical treatments, how she studied business administration textbooks during her lunch breaks, and how she treated every task, no matter how menial, with dignity and attention to detail. Karim's phone buzzed with another message from his company's PR team about damage control for Zayn's latest incident. As he watched Amira carefully organizing her cleaning supplies in the supply closet, an idea began to form in his mind. It was unconventional, perhaps even crazy, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "Miss Martinez," he called out, his voice echoing through the hallway, "would you join me in my study for a moment?" Amira's heart skipped a beat. In her 3 years working at the Hassan mansion, she'd never been called into Mr. Hassan's study. She quickly checked her appearance in the reflection of a nearby window and followed him inside. The study was a testament to old-world wealth mixed with modern success. Ancient Persian rugs covered Brazilian hardwood floors, while state-of-the-art computers lined one wall. Karim Hassan gestured for her to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "How is your mother's condition?" he asked, catching Amira off guard. "She's stable, sir. The doctors say she needs specialized treatment," but she trailed off, not wanting to burden her employer with her personal problems. "And your studies? So I've noticed you reading during your breaks." Amira straightened in her chair. "I'm taking online courses in business administration, sir, when I can afford the tuition." Karim nodded, standing to pace behind his desk. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Martinez, one that could solve both our problems." He paused, carefully considering his next words. "I want you to marry my son." The silence that followed was deafening. Amira's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. I don't understand, sir." "It's simple. You've seen the news, I'm sure. My son Zayn needs structure, responsibility, someone to ground him. You need financial support for your mother's treatment and your education." He sat down again, folding his hands on the desk. "I propose a 1-year marriage contract. In exchange, I will cover all medical expenses for your mother and fund your complete education at any university of your choice." Amira's mind cleared. She'd seen Zayn Hassan in passing in the tabloids, the handsome playboy who treated the mansion like a hotel, barely acknowledging the staff's existence. The idea of marrying him seemed absurd. "But sir, your son, he doesn't even know I exist. And the social differences are precisely why this can work," Karim interrupted. "You understand the value of hard work, of responsibility. These are qualities my son desperately needs to learn." Amira's thoughts turned to her mother, lying in the hospital bed, trying to hide her pain behind a brave smile. The specialized treatment she needed was well beyond their means, and her student loans were already overwhelming. "Would it be real?" she asked softly. "It would be a legal marriage, but the nature of your relationship would be up to you and Zayn to determine. I'm asking for 1 year of your life, Miss Martinez. In return, you'll have the means to save your mother and build your future." As the proposition hung in the air between them, Amira's mind raced through the implications. It seemed impossible, yet the potential benefits were too significant to dismiss outright. Her mother's face floated before her eyes, the woman who had sacrificed everything to give her daughter a better life in America after they'd immigrated from Mexico. Karim watched her internal struggle with keen interest. You don't have to answer immediately. Take 24 hours to think it over. But remember, discretion is paramount. This arrangement must remain between us." Amira stood on shaky legs, her world tilted on its axis. As she reached the study door, Karim's voice stopped her once more. "Miss Martinez?" Sometimes the most unexpected opportunities can lead to the greatest transformations. She nodded numbly and stepped out into the hallway, her cleaning cart forgotten as she walked towards the staff room in a daze. Behind her, Karim Hassan turned to look out his study window again, watching the gardeners tend to the vast grounds of his estate. He'd built an empire from nothing, but his greatest challenge lay in saving his only son from himself. As he observed Amira's reflection in the window glass, her posture straight despite her obvious shock, he allowed himself to hope that perhaps he'd found the solution to both their problems. Zain Hassan's Lamborghini screeched to a halt in front of the mansion's grand entrance, hip-hop music blaring from its speakers. As he stepped out, his designer shoes crunching on the gravel driveway, he noticed something unusual. His father's car was still in a circular drive despite the early hour. Young Mr. Hassan Jenkins, the butler, greeted him at the door with his usual stoic expression. "Your father requests your immediate presence in the study." Zain ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, his hangover pounding behind his designer sunglasses. "Tell him I'll be there after I get some sleep," he insisted on immediately, sir. His exact words were, "even if you have to carry him in." Curiosity peeked through his exhaustion. Zain changed direction and headed for his father's study. As he approached, he heard voices, his father's and a woman's he didn't recognize. He pushed open the heavy wooden door without knocking, freezing in place at the scene before him. His father sat behind his desk, looking unusually serious even for him. Beside the desk stood one of the cleaning staff. He'd seen her around, but had never paid much attention. She wore simple clothes, her hair pulled back severely, yet there was something striking about her presence. "Ah, Zain, how kind of you to join us before noon," Karim said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Please sit down. We need to discuss your future." "If this is about Miami, Dad, the PR team is handling it." Zain dropped into a chair, maintaining as much dignity as possible while fighting a splitting headache. "This is about much more than Miami. This is about your complete lack of responsibility, your disregard for our family's reputation, and the solution I've devised to address both issues." Karim gestured to the young woman. "This is Amira Martinez. As of next week, she will be your wife." The silence that followed was broken only by Zain's sudden incredulous laugh. "Good one, Dad. Did Jenkins put you up to this?" "This is not a joke, Zain. Miss Martinez has agreed to marry you for 1 year. During this time, you will live together as husband and wife, and you will begin taking your position in the company seriously." Zain stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. "This is insane. You can't force me to marry the help." Amira flinched at his words but held her ground, her chin raised slightly. It was the first time Zain had really looked at her, and something in her steady gaze made him pause. "I can't force you," Karim agreed. "But I can freeze your accounts, cancel your cards, and remove your access to any family resources if you refuse. The choice is yours." "You're bluffing," Zain said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Try me." Karim pulled out his phone. "I have the bank on speed dial. One word from me, and your platinum life becomes decidedly more modest." Zain looked between his father and Amira, searching for any sign that this was an elaborate prank. Finding none, he turned his anger on Amira. "And you agreed to this. What's your angle? Looking for a quick payday?" "I agreed because your father offered to help my mother receive medical treatment she desperately needs," Amira replied, her voice quiet but firm. "And to help me complete my education. Not everyone has the luxury of throwing away opportunities, Mr. Hassan." Something in her tone, not pleading or aggressive, just matter of fact, caught Zain off guard. He turned back to his father. 1 year? 1 year, Karim confirmed, during which time you will work at the company, learning the business from the ground up. No more all-night parties, no more tabloid scandals, no more embarrassing the family name. Zain's mind raced through his options. His father had never been this serious before, never pushed this hard, and his threat to cut off access to the family money, that was new. He tried to imagine life without his black American Express card and felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "And after the year?" he asked. If you've shown genuine progress in taking responsibility for your life and the business, you'll be free to end the marriage and resume your position as my heir. If not, Karim let the threat hang in the air. Zain looked at Amira again, really seeing her this time. She wasn't unattractive, far from it actually, but she was so different from the women he usually surrounded himself with. There was no artificial enhancement, no designer clothes, no practiced seductive looks. Just a simple, natural beauty, and those unwavering eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Fine," he spat out finally. "1 year. But I have conditions." "You're not in a position to make conditions," his father reminded him. "I want my own wing of the house. I'm not sharing my personal space with a stranger." Karim glanced at Amira, who nodded slightly. "Acceptable. Anything else?" "This stays private. No press releases, no announcements. As far as anyone knows, we fell madly in love and had a whirlwind romance." "That was already part of the plan," Karim agreed. "The wedding will be small but elegant, befitting a private couple. You'll both sign non-disclosure agreements today." Zain stood up straighter, adjusting his jacket with as much dignity as he could muster. "Are we done here? I need to sleep off this headache before I sign my life away." "One more thing," his father said. "Miss Martinez will be moving into the East Wing this afternoon to prepare for the wedding. I suggest you begin treating your future wife with more respect than you've shown today." As Zain stormed out of the study, Amira remained behind, her hands clasped tightly together. She watched him go, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The weight of her decision pressed down on her shoulders, but the thought of her mother's smile when she heard about the treatment gave her strength. "He'll come around," Karim said softly. "He's not a bad person, just lost. Sometimes people need to be pushed into the right direction." Amira nodded, but as she left the study to finish her cleaning duties for the last time, she couldn't help but wonder if anyone could push Zain Hassan in any direction he didn't want to go. The east wing of the Hassan mansion felt like a different world to Amira. After 3 years of cleaning these rooms, she now stood in them as their resident, surrounded by luxury she'd only ever maintained for others. Her few personal belongings looked almost apologetic next to the antique furniture and silk drapes. The wedding had been a quiet affair 2 days ago, exactly as Mr. Hassan had promised. A handful of carefully selected guests, a justice of the peace, and a cover story about a whirlwind romance between the younger Hassan and a young business student he'd met at a charity event. Amira had worn a simple white dress, and Zain had shown up in an impeccable suit, looking handsome but distant. Now, as she organized her modest wardrobe in the massive walk-in closet that was bigger than her old apartment's bedroom, Amira heard the distinctive sound of Zain's Lamborghini roaring to life outside. He hadn't spoken more than 10 words to her since the ceremony, treating their marriage like an inconvenient business meeting he was forced to attend. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting one of the household staff. Instead, Karim Hassan entered, carrying a large white box. "Good morning, Amira. I trust you're settling in?" "Yes, sir. I mean, Mr. Hassan," she corrected herself, still adjusting to her new position in the household. "Please call me Karim, we're family now." He placed the box on her bed. "These are for you. Can't have my daughter-in-law dressing below her station." Inside the box, Amira found several designer outfits, each one probably worth more than her yearly salary as a housekeeper. "This is too much," she protested. "This is necessary," Karim corrected gently. "You're a Hassan now, at least for the next year. You'll be expected to attend business functions, charity events, social gatherings. Your presence and presentation will reflect on our family." Amira ran her fingers over a silk blouse that probably cost more than her mother's monthly medication. "I don't know how to be this," she gestured vaguely at the clothes. "Just be yourself, Amira. That's exactly why I chose you." Karim moved to the window, watching his son's car disappear down the driveway. "Zain is scheduled to begin working at the company tomorrow. Perhaps you'd like to join him." "Join him?" Amira asked, surprised. "You're studying business administration, aren't you? Consider this an internship. You'll learn the company from the ground up, just like Zain. It might help to have someone in the same boat with him." Amira's heart raced at the opportunity. This was more than she'd dared hope for when agreeing to the arrangement. "I would be honored." "Excellent. Jenkins will drive you both tomorrow morning." Karim headed for the door, but paused. "Oh, And Amira, the staff has been instructed to treat you as Mrs. Hassan now, not as their former colleague. I know it might be uncomfortable at first, but it's necessary for maintaining appearances. After he left, Amira sat on her new bed, surrounded by luxury she hadn't earned and opportunities she'd never dreamed of. The guilt of leaving her fellow housekeepers behind warred with the excitement of learning the business world from the inside. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How's married life, mi amor?" Attached was a photo of her mother in the private hospital room Karim had arranged, looking more comfortable than she had in months. Amira typed back, "Different, but I'm learning." She didn't mention how her new husband barely acknowledged her existence, or how the other household staff now called her Mrs. Hassan with awkward formality. Instead, she added, "Starting at the company tomorrow, wish me luck." Her mother's reply was immediate. "You don't need luck, Nihija. You've always had something better, determination." Looking around the opulent room, Amira squared her shoulders. She might not have chosen this path, but she would walk it with dignity. Tomorrow she would step into the corporate world she'd only read about in textbooks. And maybe, just maybe, she could prove that Karim Hassan's faith in her wasn't misplaced. That evening, as she prepared for bed, she heard Zain return home. Voices drifted up from the driveway. A woman's laugh, Zain's low murmur. Amira moved to the window and saw him helping a gorgeous blonde out of his car. The woman was everything Amira wasn't. Tall, glamorous, clearly comfortable in the world of wealth and privilege. Zain caught sight of Amira's silhouette in the window and froze for a moment. Then, deliberately, he led his companion toward the pool house, his arm around her waist. Amira stepped back from the window, her cheeks burning. Of course, this was just business for him too. They'd never discussed fidelity. It wasn't that kind of marriage. Still, something twisted uncomfortably in her stomach. She picked up one of the designer dresses Karim had brought, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror. The girl who looked back at her seemed caught between two worlds, not quite the housekeeper she'd been, not quite the socialite she was supposed to become. One day at a time, she whispered to herself, her mother's favorite saying. Tomorrow would bring new challenges at the company. She needed to focus on that, on learning everything she could during this year of opportunity. Whatever Zain did with his time was his business. But as she lay in bed that night, listening to distant laughter from the pool house, Amira couldn't help but wonder if there was more to Zain Hassan than the spoiled playboy he presented to the world. Tomorrow, they would be colleagues, as well as reluctant spouses. Perhaps in the workplace, she might catch a glimpse of the man Karim believed his son could become. The Hassan Group headquarters dominated the downtown skyline, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun like a mirror. Amira sat stiffly in the back of the company car beside Zain, both dressed in business attire, but separated by an invisible wall of tension. "Try not to embarrass me," Zain muttered as they approached the entrance. "These people aren't like the cleaning staff. They'll eat you alive if they sense weakness." "Thank you for the warning," Amira replied coolly, smoothing down her new pencil skirt. "Any other helpful advice?" Zain paused, seeming surprised by her composed response. "Just stay out of my way." The lobby was a hive of activity, employees rushing to and fro with purpose. Heads turned as Zain walked in, whispers following in their wake. Amira caught fragments of conversation. Hassan's son, new wife, where did he find her? Mrs. Chen, Karim's executive assistant, met them at the elevator. "Good morning, Mr. Hassan, Mrs. Hassan. Your father has arranged orientation meetings for you both this morning." "Separate meetings," she added, noting their matching looks of relief. Amira was led to the Human Resources Department, where she spent the morning learning company policies and procedures. She took detailed notes, asked intelligent questions, and absorbed everything she could. This was her chance to learn the business world from the inside, and she wasn't going to waste it. During lunch, she found herself in the executive dining room, surrounded by curious stares. She chose a quiet corner table, but was quickly joined by a friendly-looking woman in her 30s. "Sarah Mitchell, marketing director," the woman introduced herself. "Mind if I join you? It's not often we get new blood in the executive dining room." "Please," Amira gestured to the empty chair. "I'm Amira. Hassan." "Oh, we all know who you are," Sarah smiled. "The mysterious woman who tamed the wild child of the Hassan family. You're all anyone's talking about." Before Amira could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Zain had arrived with a group of young executives, all laughing at something he'd said. He looked completely in his element, charm oozing from every pore. "Old habits die hard," Sarah commented, following Amira's gaze. "Those are the trust fund kids. Their parents all sit on the board. They've been Zain's partners in crime since college." Amira watched as Zain held court at his table, noting how different he seemed here compared to his sullen behavior at home. Here he was animated, engaged, clearly intelligent, despite his rebellious reputation. "Tell me about the company," Amira said, turning back to Sarah. "I'd love to understand more about how everything works." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Finally, someone who's actually interested in the business." "Well, it all started with Karim Hassan's father." The afternoon found Amira in a series of departmental orientations. She paid particular attention during the sustainability presentation, noting areas where improvements could be made. Her environmental science electives in college had opened her eyes to corporate responsibility, and she could see numerous opportunities for positive change. As she made notes on her tablet, the presenter, a middle-aged man named Douglas, stopped mid-sentence. "Mrs. Hassan, you have a question?" Amira looked up to find everyone staring at her. "Actually, yes. I noticed the company's recycling program doesn't extend to the satellite offices. Wouldn't implementing a company-wide green initiative help with both environmental impact and public relations?" A silence fell over the room. Then Douglas smiled slowly. "That's actually a very good point. We've been discussing something similar in committee." From the back of the room came a familiar scoff. Zain had slipped in at some point and was lounging against the wall, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps Mrs. Hassan would like to join the Environmental Impact Committee," Douglas suggested. "We meet every Wednesday." "I would love to," Amira replied, ignoring Zain's presence. After the meeting, Zain caught up with her in the hallway. "Playing the corporate wife already? How convenient that you're suddenly an environmental expert." "I studied environmental science as part of my degree program," Amira replied evenly. "And I'm not playing at anything. Unlike some people, I actually want to learn about this business." Something flickered in Zain's eyes, surprise, maybe even respect, before his mask of indifference slipped back into place. "Just remember why you're really here. My father may have bought you a seat at the table, but that doesn't mean you belong there." "No," Amira agreed quietly. "I'll have to earn my place." "Just like you should have been doing all along." She walked away before he could respond, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. Behind her, Zain watched her go, an unfamiliar feeling stirring in his chest. For the first time, he wondered if there might be more to his arranged wife than he'd assumed. The day ended with Amira back in Karim's office, delivering her observations and suggestions. He listened intently, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. "You've surprised them," he said finally. "That's good. Keep surprising them. Change often comes from unexpected places." He glanced out at the darkening sky. "And Zain? How did he handle his first day?" Amira thought about the glimpses she caught of him, commanding attention in the dining room, slouching through meetings, that brief moment of genuine emotion in the hallway. "He's capable of more than he shows," she said carefully. "He just needs to believe it himself." Karim nodded slowly. "Perhaps that's why you're exactly what he needs." 3 months into their arranged marriage, autumn had painted the Hassan estate in brilliant shades of red and gold. Amira sat in the mansion's library, surrounded by quarterly reports and environmental impact assessments. She'd thrown herself into her work at Hassan Group, earning respect from colleagues who'd initially dismissed her as just another trophy wife. The sound of raised voices from Karim's study interrupted her concentration. She recognized Zain's angry tone, followed by his father's calmer response. Moments later, the study door burst open, and Zain stormed past the library. He stopped abruptly when he noticed Amira. "Enjoying your social climbing?" he asked bitterly, gesturing at her papers. "Father's latest board meeting minutes make for thrilling reading, I'm sure." Instead of responding with her usual quiet dignity, Amira surprised them both. "Actually, I'm reviewing the proposal for implementing solar panels across all Hassan properties. The one you would have known about if you'd stayed awake during yesterday's sustainability meeting." Zain blinked, thrown off balance by her direct challenge. He moved closer, glancing at her detailed notes. "Solar panels? That's at least a $50 million investment, which would pay for itself within 5 years. and position Hassan Group as an industry leader in corporate sustainability, Amira countered, sliding a spreadsheet toward him. The numbers don't lie. Something shifted in Zain's expression as he picked up the document. These projections, they're actually impressive. He sank into a chair across from her, his earlier anger forgotten. But the board will never approve such a large capital expenditure. They might, if it was presented by the CEO's son, especially one who's finally showing interest in the company's future. Amira held her breath, watching him process her words. For a long moment, Zain studied the proposal in silence. The timing would have to be perfect, he said finally. End of Q4, when the tax implications would be most advantageous, Amira finished, trying to hide her surprise at his business acumen. I didn't realize you paid attention to such details. There's a lot you don't realize about me, Zain muttered, but without his usual hostility. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Amira had come to recognize as a sign of internal conflict. Why are you doing this? Doing what? This. He gestured at the papers spread between them. The Perfect Corporate Wife Act, the environmental initiatives, charming the board members. What's your real angle? Amira set down her pen, meeting his gaze directly. Would you believe me if I said I actually care about making a difference? That maybe I see potential in this company and in... She stopped herself before adding, in you. Zain leaned back, studying her with new interest. You're not what I expected, he admitted quietly. Neither are you, Amira replied. When you actually try. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed, breaking the moment between them. Zain stood abruptly, gathering the solar panel proposals. I'll look these over. Maybe we could discuss them over dinner. Amira's heart skipped a beat. In 3 months of marriage, they'd never shared a meal alone. I'd like that. Right. Well, 7 o'clock? The small dining room. He was already backing toward the door as if afraid to commit fully to this moment of vulnerability. I'll be there, Amira promised, watching him leave with the proposals clutched in his hand like a shield. After he left, Amira sat back in her chair, processing what had just happened. For the first time, she glimpsed the person Zain could be when he dropped his carefully maintained facade of indifference, the intelligence behind his eyes when he'd grasped the financial implications, the way he'd actually listened to her ideas. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Coming to visit this weekend, mi amor. Can't wait to meet this husband of yours properly. Reality crashed back in. Her mother had been recovering well in the private facility Karim had arranged, but this would be her first visit to the mansion. How would she explain the complicated dance of appearances she and Zain maintained? The separate wings, the careful distance, the business arrangement masquerading as marriage. Yet something had shifted today. That moment of connection over the proposals, the dinner invitation. Perhaps there was hope for more than just a business arrangement. Amira gathered her papers, her mind already racing ahead to dinner. For the first time since their wedding, she found herself caring about what Zain would think of her. Not as his father's choice or his arranged wife, but as herself. In his study, Karim watched through the window as Zain walked the grounds, reading Amira's proposal with unusual focus. A small smile played across his face. Sometimes the best business decisions weren't about business at all. The small dining room glowed with soft candlelight, an intimate setting that made Amira's heart race as she smoothed down her dress. She'd chosen a simple blue sheath that made her feel confident, yet comfortable. At precisely 7, Zain appeared in the doorway, having changed from his business suit into casual elegance that probably cost more than her old apartment's yearly rent. I've changed, he noted, taking in her appearance with an unreadable expression. So did you, she countered, settling into the chair he automatically pulled out for her. The gesture seemed to surprise them both. Jenkins appeared silently with wine, pouring 2 glasses before disappearing. The awkward silence stretched between them until Zain pulled out Amira's proposal. I've been reviewing the numbers, he began, clearly more comfortable with business than small talk. The initial investment is significant, but if we phase it over 18 months, the cost could be distributed across 3 fiscal years, Amira finished, reaching for her own copy. Their fingers brushed as they both moved to turn a page, sending an unexpected jolt through her hand. As their appetizers arrived, the conversation flowed more naturally. Zain revealed a sharp business mind behind his playboy facade, asking intelligent questions about implementation timelines and regulatory compliance. Amira found herself genuinely enjoying their discussion, especially when Zain proposed additional green initiatives she hadn't considered. "We could extend the program to our international properties," he suggested, gesturing enthusiastically with his fork. "Start with Dubai, where solar makes perfect sense, then expand to..." He trailed off, noticing Amira's smile. "What? Nothing. It's just, I've never seen you this excited about work before." Zain set down his fork, his expression turning serious. "Can I ask you something? And I want the truth." Amira nodded, her pulse quickening. "Why did you really agree to this arrangement? And don't say it was just about your mother's treatment. You could have asked for that without agreeing to marry me." The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Amira took a sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. "I saw an opportunity," she said finally. "Not just for my mother's care or my education, but to make a real difference. Your father built something remarkable here, but it could be so much more. And you..." She hesitated. "And me?" Zain prompted softly. "I saw someone who had everything except purpose. Maybe I thought, maybe we could find purpose together." Zain stared at her for a long moment. "My mother left when I was 12, he said abruptly. "Did you know that?" Amira shook her head, surprised by the sudden confidence. She decided the wealthy lifestyle wasn't worth the pressure of being a Hassan. Said she needed to find herself or something. "Last I heard, she was living in France with her yoga instructor." He smiled bitterly. "I guess I decided if she could throw it all away, why should I take it seriously?" "But you do take it seriously," Amira replied gently. "I've seen how quickly you grasp business concepts, how the employees respond to you when you actually engage. You just never let anyone see that side of you." "Including myself?" Zain asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Before Amira could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression closing off. "It's Sophia," he said, naming the blonde who still visited the pool house regularly. "She's outside." The intimate atmosphere shattered. Amira stood, gathering her papers. "You should go. We can discuss the proposal more tomorrow at the office." "Amira," Zain started, then stopped, caught between two worlds, the meaningful connection they'd just shared and the carefree lifestyle he wasn't quite ready to abandon. "It's fine," she said, not meeting his eyes. "This is just business, remember? We both agreed to that." She left him sitting there, the candlelight casting shadows across his troubled face. In the hallway, she passed a mirror and caught sight of herself, cheeks flushed, eyes bright from wine and conversation, and something else she wasn't ready to name. Later that night, she heard voices from the pool house again, but this time they seemed muted, less carefree. From her window, she saw Zain and Sophia in what appeared to be an intense discussion. When Sophia's car roared away minutes later, Zain remained by the pool, staring into the water for a long time. Amira turned away from the window and opened her laptop, losing herself in work until exhaustion forced her to sleep. But in her dreams, she kept returning to that moment when their fingers touched over the proposal, and the look in Zain's eyes when he'd shared the story about his mother. In the mansion's security room, Karim reviewed the dinner footage with satisfaction. He'd installed cameras in every room after his wife's departure, a precaution that had proved useful in more ways than one. As he watched his son and daughter-in-law's interaction, he noticed something that gave him hope. When Zain thought Amira wasn't looking, he stopped pretending not to care. The Hassan Group's annual charity gala transformed the mansion's grand ballroom into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across silk gowns and designer tuxedos, as Silicon Valley's elite mingled with old money families. Amira stood before her bedroom mirror, hardly recognizing herself in the emerald evening gown Karim had insisted on having custom-made for her. 6 months into her marriage to Zain, she'd grown more comfortable navigating high society events, but tonight felt different. This would be their first major public appearance since rumors had begun circulating about their marriage's unusual origins. A knock at her door revealed Zain looking devastating in a black tuxedo. He paused when he saw her, something flickering in his eyes that made her heart skip. "You look..." he started, then cleared his throat. "The board members are already arriving. We should make an appearance." Since their dinner 2 weeks ago, something had shifted between them. Zain had stopped bringing women to the pool house, and they'd fallen into a comfortable routine of working together on the solar initiative. But they'd carefully avoided discussing their growing connection, as if naming it might break whatever fragile understanding they'd reached. As they descended the grand staircase together, Amira was acutely aware of his hand at the small of her back. Whispers followed them through the crowd, some admiring, others speculative. Mrs. Hassan, Sarah Mitchell from marketing, waved them over to where she stood with a group of board members. "We were just discussing your solar proposal. Mr. Chen here has some concerns about the timeline." Zain's hand tightened slightly on Amira's back as they approached the group. She'd learned that this was his tell when he was preparing for a business confrontation. "Actually," Zain spoke before Amira could respond, "I've been working closely with the implementation team. We've developed a phased approach that should address any timing concerns." Mr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "You've been working on this, Zain? I was under the impression this was your wife's pet project." "We're a team," Zain replied smoothly, surprising Amira, "and the numbers speak for themselves. Would you like to discuss the projected ROI?" As Zain launched into a detailed analysis that had Mr. Chen nodding thoughtfully, Amira felt a touch on her arm. "Could I borrow you for a moment, dear?" It was Mrs. Chen, the board member's wife, a smile not quite reaching her eyes. Amira followed her to a quiet corner near the French doors. "That's quite an achievement," Mrs. Chen said, sipping champagne. "Getting Zain Hassan to take an interest in actual work. Tell me, how exactly did you manage that?" "I'm not sure what you mean," Amira replied carefully. "Oh, come now. We all know about your previous position here, the cleaning staff talks, you know, and that convenient timing with your mother's illness." She paused meaningfully. "Some might call it opportunistic." Amira's chest tightened, but years of dealing with demanding employers had taught her to maintain her composure. "I prefer to focus on the future, Mrs. Chen. The solar initiative could revolutionize corporate sustainability standards." "Yes, sustainability. Such a convenient passion for a former housekeeper." Mrs. Chen's voice dripped with condescension. "Though I suppose we all have to sustain ourselves somehow." Before Amira could respond, another voice cut in. "Is there a problem here?" Zain appeared at Amira's side, his expression pleasant but his eyes hard as steel. Mrs. Chen's smile widened artificially. "Not at all. I was just complimenting your wife on her rapid adaptation to our world." "My wife," Zain said deliberately, wrapping an arm around Amira's waist, "has more business acumen than half the trust fund ladies in this room, including me until recently." He smiled coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe they're about to announce dinner seating." As he led her away, Amira felt slightly dazed. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did." Zain's jaw was tight. "I've known Regina Chen my whole life. She's a viper in Chanel." He stopped suddenly, turning to face Amira. "Did I ever apologize for how I treated you in the beginning?" "Zain," Amira glanced around at the crowded ballroom, "I mean it. I was worse than Regina Chen, and you never deserved that. You've done more for this company in 6 months than I've done in years." Something in his voice made Amira look up, meeting his gaze. The intensity there took her breath away. For a moment, the crowded ballroom faded away, and it was just the two of them standing close enough to... "Zain, darling." A familiar voice shattered the moment. Sophia appeared in a dress that left little to the imagination, air-kissing Zain's cheek. "You haven't returned my calls." Amira stepped back instinctively, but Zain caught her hand. "Sophia, you'll excuse us. My wife and I need to greet the new investors." He led Amira away, still holding her hand. They both knew there were no new investors to greet, but neither mentioned it. Instead, they circulated the room together, presenting a united front that had the gossips buzzing with new speculation. Later, during dinner, Amira felt Zain's foot touch hers under the table. When she glanced at him, he was focused on his conversation with a board member, but his foot remained pressed against hers, a small point of contact that felt more intimate than any kiss. From his place at the head table, Karim watched his son and daughter-in-law with satisfaction. He'd seen Zain's defense of Amira, noted how they unconsciously leaned toward each other when speaking. His gamble was paying off better than he'd hoped. But as he observed Regina Chen whispering with other society matrons, he knew the real tests were yet to come. Money and influence could arrange a marriage, but they couldn't protect a growing love from the sharks that circled in these waters. The morning after the gala, Amira arrived at Hassan Group headquarters to find her office buzzing with excitement. Sarah rushed in without knocking, tablet in hand. "Have you seen it?" she asked breathlessly. "Seen what?" Sarah thrust the tablet at her. On the screen was a Society Blog's homepage, dominated by photos from last night's gala. But it wasn't the event coverage that drew Amira's attention. It was the sidebar article titled, "Hassan Heirs Marriage of Convenience. Inside Sources Tell All." The article detailed everything: her former position as a housekeeper, her mother's illness, the timing of the marriage. It even included quotes from anonymous household staff about the arranged nature of their union. "It's trending on social media," Sarah said gently. "The board is already calling for an emergency meeting." Amira's hands trembled as she set down the tablet. She'd known this day might come, but the reality was still overwhelming. Her phone buzzed. Messages from her mother, from old friends, from reporters seeking comment. The door burst open again, this time revealing Zain. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usual polish replaced by barely contained anger. "Have you seen—" "Yes." Amira stood, straightening her spine. "What does your father want us to do?" "Father's in Dubai. Won't be back until tomorrow." Zain ran a hand through his hair. "The board's meeting in an hour. They're talking about voting to remove me from the solar initiative." Apparently, a scandal-plagued heir isn't the best face for corporate responsibility. Amira felt her carefully constructed world starting to crumble. This will kill the project. Everything we've worked for. Forget the project. Zain crossed the room in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. "They're dragging your name through the mud, making you sound like some kind of gold digger who manipulated her way into our family." "Isn't that what I am?" Amira asked quietly. "We made a business arrangement, Zain. We both knew the risks." "Is that all this is to you? Business?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Because I haven't been treating it like business for weeks now, and I don't think you have either." Before Amira could respond, her computer chimed with an incoming email. It was from Regina Chen, CC'd to the entire board. "In light of recent revelations about the questionable nature of certain executive relationships, I move to suspend all projects currently under review." She's trying to kill the solar initiative, Amira realized. This isn't just about us. She's using the scandal to block corporate environmental responsibility altogether. Zain read over her shoulder, his expression hardened. "She's been fighting against modernization since my father first proposed expanding into tech. The old guard wants to keep things exactly as they are." He straightened suddenly. "Which is exactly why we need to change them." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to stop hiding." He pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. "Sarah, get the PR team in the conference room, now." He turned to Amira. "Do you trust me?" The question caught her off guard. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have hesitated to say no. Now, looking into his eyes, she didn't hesitate to say, "Yes." "Then follow my lead." The next hour was a blur of activity. PR teams drafted statements, lawyers reviewed documents, and Zain worked the phone like a man possessed. When they walked into the board meeting, Amira was surprised to find reporters and cameras present. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zain began, standing at the head of the table with Amira beside him. "You've all read this morning's articles about my marriage, about how it began as an arrangement between my father and a former employee. And you know what? It's true." Murmurs erupted around the table. Regina Chen smiled triumphantly. "What you don't know," Zain continued, his voice carrying over the whispers, "is that it was the best business decision Hassan Group has ever made. Because this former employee, my wife, saw potential in this company that we'd all forgotten. She didn't just marry into this family, she revolutionized our approach to corporate responsibility." He gestured to the screens behind him, where graphs and projections appeared. "The solar initiative isn't just about environmental impact, it's about leading our industry into the future. And thanks to early implementation studies my wife insisted on, we can prove it." For the next 30 minutes, Zain and Amira presented an overwhelming case for corporate sustainability, backed by data that even the most conservative board members couldn't ignore. They showed how their pilot program had already reduced costs at 2 properties by 40%, and how investor interest had spiked since the initiative's announcement. "So yes," Zain concluded, "our marriage began as a business arrangement, but like any good business decision, it evolved based on new data. The data shows that together we're stronger, more innovative, better equipped to lead Hassan Group into the future. He turned to Amira, taking her hand. And somewhere along the way, business became personal in the best possible way. The room erupted in camera flashes as Zain kissed his wife in front of the assembled board of media. But Amira barely noticed the cameras. All she could focus on was the way Zain's hands trembled slightly as he held her, and the absolute certainty in his eyes when he pulled back to look at her. Regina Chen's outraged objections were lost in the general applause that followed. The reporters had their story, but it wasn't the scandal they'd expected. Instead, they wrote about corporate innovation, about breaking down class barriers, about love growing in unexpected places. Later, in Amira's office, Zain perched on her desk as she read through the coverage. "You know," he said casually, "that wasn't just for show, what I said about business becoming personal." Amira looked up at him, her heart racing. "I know. We still have 6 months left on our arrangement," he continued. "But I was thinking maybe we could renegotiate the terms. What did you have in mind?" "A lifetime contract," he said softly. "No escape clauses, no end date." Instead of answering, Amira stood and kissed him, pouring months of unspoken feelings into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, "One condition. Remove your things to my wing of the house. The commute from your wing is ridiculous." Zain laughed, pulling her close. "Now, that's what I call good business sense." The autumn breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the open windows of what was now their shared wing of the Hassan mansion. Zain's belongings had migrated gradually over the past 2 weeks. Designer suits hanging beside Amira's more modest wardrobe, his collection of vintage watches finding a home next to her simple jewelry box. "Your father's returning from Dubai today," Amira mentioned, adjusting Zain's tie as they prepared for work. The casual domesticity of the gesture struck them both, and Zain caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Worried about facing him after our little media spectacle?" he asked, only half joking. "Aren't you?" The truth was, neither had spoken to Karim since the board meeting revelation. He'd sent a brief message postponing his return, and the press had speculated wildly about his reaction to their public announcement. "He's the one who arranged this marriage in the first place," Zain reminded her, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. They rode to the office together, as they had every day since the story broke. The media frenzy had died down somewhat, but photographers still lingered outside Hassan Group headquarters, hoping to catch glimpses of the couple who'd captured the public's imagination. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Where once there had been whispers and sideways glances, now there were genuine smiles and respectful nods. Their solar initiative had gained unprecedented support, with other companies reaching out about implementing similar programs. "Mrs. Hassan," Amira's assistant poked her head in mid-morning. "Your mother is here for your lunch appointment." Amira's mother had become a regular visitor to her office, proud to see her daughter in the executive suite she once cleaned. Today she arrived bearing homemade tamales and a knowing smile. "So," she said once they were alone, "when were you going to tell me that my arranged marriage daughter-in-law actually fell in love with her husband?" Amira blushed, fiddling with her wedding ring. The new one Zain had surprised her with last week, replacing the simple band from their business arrangement. "Mama, don't mama me," she laughed. "I see the way we look at each other now. It's different from before. Real." She reached across the desk to squeeze Amira's hand. "I worried so much when you agreed to this arrangement. But sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places, no?" Before Amira could respond, her office door opened and Zain burst in, his face animated. "The Singapore office just confirmed. They want to be the first international location for the solar..." He stopped short, seeing his mother-in-law. "Oh, lo siento, Mrs. Martinez. I didn't know you were here." Amira's heart warmed at his attempted Spanish. He'd been practicing, she knew, wanting to connect with her family. "Perfecto timing," her mother declared, unpacking more tamales. "Sit, eat. Business can wait." To Amira's continued amazement, Zain did just that, settling in to share lunch with them. He asked her mother about her health, her garden at the new house he'd helped her buy, her opinions on the latest telenovela they all pretended not to watch. "You know," her mother said as she prepared to leave, "when Amira told me about this arrangement, I prayed every night. Not for money or success, but for her happiness. She patted Zayn's cheek affectionately. Sometimes God answers prayers in strange ways. After she left, Zayn wrapped his arms around Amira from behind as they watched her mother's car pull away. She gave me her tamale recipe, he said proudly. She what? Amira turned in his embrace, shocked. She won't even give that recipe to me. Maybe she likes me better, he teased, then grew serious. I want to learn, all of it. Your family's recipes, your traditions, your language. I want to be part of your world, not just have you fit into mine. Amira touched his face gently. When did you become so amazing, irresistible, devastatingly handsome? Real, she finished softly. Their moment was interrupted by a message from Zayn's assistant. Your father's plane just landed. They shared a look of apprehension. Together? Zayn asked. Together, Amira agreed. They found Karim in his office looking remarkably unruffled for someone whose son had just caused a media sensation. He was reading through press coverage on his tablet, his expression unreadable. Father, Zayn began, but Karim held up a hand. Sit, both of you. He set down the tablet and studied them for a long moment. When I arranged this marriage, I had 3 goals: to help a deserving young woman and her mother, to teach my son responsibility, and to ensure the future of Hassan Group. He paused. I did not, however, anticipate viral media coverage, public declarations of love, or my son learning to make tamales. Zayn and Amira exchanged nervous glances. The board is thrilled, Karim continued. Our stock is up 15%. Younger consumers are praising our progressive leadership. Other companies want to partner with us. He leaned back in his chair. All of which leads me to ask, was this part of your plan all along, Amira? Sir, taking a scandal and turning it into a triumph, using the publicity to push through environmental initiatives that the board had been blocking, making my son not just accept responsibility but embrace it. His stern expression cracked into a smile. Because if so, I should put you in charge of corporate strategy immediately. The tension in the room broke as they all laughed. It wasn't planned, Amira assured him. It just evolved naturally. Like your feelings for each other? Karim's eyes twinkled. Don't look so surprised. I have security cameras, remember? I saw you falling in love long before you admitted it to yourselves. Said the girl. Those cameras, I knew we should have disabled them. You tried some. 3 times as a teenager. I just had them replaced with better ones. Karim stood, his expression growing serious again. The question now is, what next? The year isn't up, but circumstances have clearly changed. Zayn took Amira's hand. We've already decided. We want to make it real, legally, publicly, permanently. Good, Karim nodded. Because I've already arranged for a proper wedding. 1 month from today, unless you object. 1 month? Amira gasped. But the planning, the arrangements, already taken care of. Consider it my wedding gift, the celebration you both deserved from the start. He looked at his son. Unless you'd prefer to plan it yourself. God, no, Zayn laughed. But maybe this time we could invite Amira's entire family, not just the carefully selected guests. Karim's eyes softened. I like that. He turned to Amira. Your mother has already approved the plans. She was quite insistent about the menu, including her famous tamales. As they left Karim's office, Amira felt lighter than she had in weeks. That went better than expected, she said. He loves you, Zayn replied simply. How could he not? You did everything he hoped for and more. He pulled her close, ignoring the curious glances from passing employees. You made me want to be better, not just for the company or my father, but for myself, for us. We made each other better, Amira corrected, standing on tiptoe to kiss him quickly. Speaking of better, Zayn grinned, want to help me practice making those tamales tonight? Your mother swore me to secrecy about the recipe, but I'm pretty sure spouse privilege overrides that. Amira laughed, linking her arm through his as they walked to their next meeting. Not a chance. Some family secrets are sacred, but later that night, as they attempted to make tamales together in their kitchen, making a glorious mess and laughing more than cooking, Amira realized that they were creating their own family secrets, their own traditions, their own love story. One that had started as a business arrangement, but had grown into something far more valuable than any contract could define. The Hassan Estate's gardens had been transformed into a wonderland of lights and flowers, blending Mexican and Arabic traditions in a celebration that symbolized the true merging of two families, two cultures, and two hearts. 1 month had passed since Karim's return, and the formal wedding he planned was about to begin. Amira stood in her old room in the east wing, now converted into a bridal suite, as her mother adjusted her veil. The dress was a masterpiece of fusion, traditional white lace incorporating subtle geometric patterns that echoed Middle Eastern designs. "Your father would have been so proud," her mother said softly, touching the locket around Amira's neck that contained his photo. "He always said you were destined for great things." "I wish he could be here," Amira replied, squeezing her mother's hand. "But look at you, completely recovered and stronger than ever, thanks to you and your leap of faith." Her mother's eyes sparkled with tears. "Although I don't think faith is the right word anymore, is it? Now it's just love." A knock at the door revealed Sarah, looking elegant in her maid of honor dress. "Everyone's ready, and Amira, you might want to see this." She led them to a window overlooking the garden. Zayn was greeting guests, but unlike their first wedding, he moved with genuine joy, introducing Amira's cousins to board members, making sure her old colleagues from the housekeeping staff had premium seats, fussing over every detail like a man who couldn't wait to marry the love of his life. "Very different from the first time," Sarah commented. "Remember how he could barely look at you during that ceremony?" "Different man," Amira's mother nodded approvingly. "Different heart." The ceremony itself was a beautiful blend of traditions. They exchanged vows in English, Arabic, and Spanish. Zayn had practiced for weeks to get the Spanish pronunciation perfect, bringing tears to his new family's eyes. When it came time for Amira's vows, she surprised everyone by delivering part of hers in flawless Arabic, a skill she'd been secretly learning. "From this day forward," she said in both languages, "I choose you not because of any arrangement or obligation, but because you've shown me that the greatest business deals are the ones that transform into love." Zayn's hands trembled as he placed the ring on her finger. Not the expensive one he'd bought last month, but her mother's wedding ring, restored and resized. "You've taught me that real wealth isn't in bank accounts or business deals," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's in the way you see the best in people, even when they don't see it themselves. You didn't just marry into my family, you made us a better family." Their kiss was met with thunderous applause, genuine celebration, replacing the polite acknowledgement of their first ceremony. Regina Chen was notably absent, having resigned from the board after the success of their solar initiative made her opposition untenable. At the reception, Karim surprised everyone by taking the microphone. "When I arranged this marriage," he began, causing a ripple of laughter through the crowd who now knew the full story, "I thought I was making a business decision. What I actually did was give my son the opportunity to become the man I always knew he could be, and give our family the daughter I never knew we needed." He raised his glass. "To Zayn and Amira, proof that the best investments are the ones we make in people, not profits." Later, as they swayed together during their first dance, Zayn whispered, "Have I mentioned how much I love you?" "Once or twice," Amira smiled, "but I wouldn't mind hearing it again." "I love you," he said seriously. "Not because my father arranged it, or because you helped save the company, or even because you've made me a better person. I love you because you're you. The woman who sees the best in everyone, who fights for what she believes in, who taught me that real love isn't arranged or planned, it's earned day by day, choice by choice." Amira laid her head on his shoulder, watching their families mingle and laugh together. Her mother was teaching Karim to dance salsa, while Zayn's cousins from Dubai eagerly learned Mexican card games from her uncles. Two worlds, once separated by wealth and culture, now united by love. "Ready to go public with the next phase?" she asked quietly. Zayn's steps faltered slightly. "You mean?" She nodded against his shoulder. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday. We'll have a new little Hassan in about 7 months." His arms tightened around her. "Really? Really? Though we might want to wait to tell everyone. Your father still has those security cameras everywhere." Zayn laughed, spinning her around joyfully. "Let him watch. Let everyone watch. I want the world to know that the best thing that ever happened to me started as a business arrangement in my father's study." As the reception continued around them, Amira and Zayn snuck away to their special spot in the garden, the place where she had once tended flowers as a housekeeper, where he had first begun to see her as more than an obligation. Above them, the stars twinkled like distant diamonds, but neither noticed. They were too busy planning their future, one that had grown far beyond any arrangement into something precious and real. In his security room, Karim watched them on the monitors, smiling softly. Then, with a decisive click, he turned off the cameras in their corner of the garden. Some moments, he decided, should belong just to them. 5 years had passed since the arranged marriage that changed everything. The Hassan Group headquarters now boasted the largest corporate solar installation in the country, a gleaming testament to the vision that had brought Amira and Zain together. But the real changes were evident in the smaller details. The on-site daycare center that served both executives and maintenance staff, the educational programs for employees' children, the environmental initiatives that had transformed the company's culture. Amira stood at the window of her executive office, one hand resting on her growing belly. Their second child was due in 3 months. Below, she could see their 4-year-old daughter, Sophia, playing in the corporate garden during her daycare break. The little girl had her father's dark curls and her mother's determined spirit, already insisting on helping tend the flowers, just as Amira once had. "Mrs. Hassan?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your husband is here with the Sustainability Committee reports." Zain entered, greeting her with a kiss that still made her heart skip. 5 years of marriage had only deepened their connection, each day adding new layers to their love story. "The latest numbers are incredible," he said, spreading reports across her desk. "The initiative has been implemented in 80% of our global properties, and the energy savings are exceeding all projections. And the employee education program? Full enrollment." He grinned. "Though I think some of them signed up just to hear you teach. You're becoming quite the corporate celebrity, mi amor." Amira smiled at his Spanish endearment, learning from the best. "Your presentation to the Latino Business Association last week was impressive. Mama called to say she saw it on the news. She helped me practice my pronunciation." Zain moved to stand behind her at the window, wrapping his arms around her. "Sophia's getting better at gardening than both of us." Below, their daughter was carefully showing a younger child how to plant marigolds, her small face serious with concentration. "She reminds me of you," Zain murmured. "Teaching others, making everything around her better. She has your charm," Amira noted. "Did you see how she convinced the board to fund her daycare garden project? That was all you. I never could have swayed the board before you taught me how to actually care about making a difference." Their moment was interrupted by a knock. Karim entered, looking distinguished as ever, but softer somehow, grandfatherhood having mellowed his corporate edge. "Am I interrupting?" he asked, though his smile suggested he didn't mind if he was. "I wanted to discuss the mentorship program Amira proposed." The program had been her latest initiative, pairing corporate employees with maintenance and service staff who wanted to advance their careers. It was her way of creating more stories like her own, opening doors for others, as Karim had once done for her. "The first group of mentees starts next month," Amira reported proudly. "We have executives from every department volunteering to mentor, including some who once turned their noses up at the idea of working with the help," Zain added, still protective of his wife even after all these years. "Times change," Karim said softly. "People change. When I arranged your marriage, I hoped to teach Zain responsibility. Instead, you both taught all of us about possibility." He moved to the window, watching his granddaughter below. "Which reminds me, the board has been discussing succession planning." Zain tensed slightly. Even after 5 years of proving himself, part of him still expected his father's disapproval. "I'm stepping down as CEO next year," Karim continued. "The board has unanimously recommended joint leadership." He turned to face them. "They want you both to take over, Zain as CEO, Amira as Executive Director of Corporate Strategy and Sustainability." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Zain found his voice first. "Both of us, that's unprecedented. So was falling in love with your arranged wife and revolutionizing corporate environmental policy," Karim pointed out. "You two have a way of making unprecedented things work." Amira gripped Zain's hand. "Are you sure the board is ready for this?" "The board is more than ready. The question is, are you? Leading this company together will be different from running individual departments." Zain and Amira exchanged a look that held 5 years of partnership, trust, and love. "We're ready," they said together. Karim nodded, satisfied. Good, because there's one more thing. He pulled out his phone, pulling up security camera footage from the daycare garden. Sophia has apparently decided that the entire playground should be converted into an organic vegetable garden. She's quite persuasive. Half the children are already pulling up the grass. They watched as their daughter orchestrated her mini revolution, directing her troops with a familiar mix of charm and determination. She gets that from both of you, Karim chuckled. The ability to see what could be instead of what is. He headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and congratulations on the new baby. The security cameras in the medical wing caught your last appointment. It's a boy, isn't it? After he left, Zain pulled Amira close. A boy, he whispered. Are you ready for another Hassan man in your life? As long as he takes after his father, Amira replied, touching his cheek. The real version, not the one I first met. I'm still not sure I deserve you, Zain admitted. Any of this. It was never about deserving, Amira said softly. It was about becoming who we were meant to be together. Below, Sophia had successfully convinced the daycare staff to let her expand her garden. She stood in the afternoon sun, hands on her hips, surveying her domain with satisfaction. She's going to run this company one day, Zain predicted. With her brother as head of sustainability, Amira teased, rubbing her belly. The next generation of Hassan leadership. Zain kissed her softly. Think you can handle another lifetime of business arrangements with my family? Amira smiled against his lips. Some arrangements are worth investing in forever. 10 years to the day, after their first meeting in Karim's study, Amira stood in that same room, now her office as executive director. The view from the window was different now. Solar panels gleamed on every rooftop. The corporate garden had expanded into a community space, and a new building housed the Hassan Foundation for Environmental Education. She was reviewing applications for the latest round of the mentorship program when a familiar face caught her eye. The young woman in the photo had her mother's determined expression and her father's confident smile. Sophia's first official application, Zaid said from the doorway, reading her thoughts. She insisted on going through the proper channels, no special treatment. Just like her father, Amira teased. Once he finally learned what proper channels were, Zain crossed the room to join her at the window. At 50, Karim had been an imposing figure in this same spot when he'd proposed their arrangement. Now, at 60, he spent more time in the Foundation's teaching garden with his grandchildren than in the boardroom. Hard to believe it's been 10 years, Zain mused. Sometimes I still expect to wake up and find it was all a dream. You, the kids, this life we've built. Their 5-year-old son, Karim Jr., was visible in the garden below, helping his grandfather and sister plant new trees. The youngest, Hassan, 2-year-old Elena, was toddling after them, determined to keep up. Speaking of building, Amira said, pulling out a form, the expansion plans for the Environmental Education Center are ready. We'll be able to double the number of scholarship students next year. The center had been their joint project, providing environmental science education to underprivileged students. Many of their graduates now worked at Hassan Group or had gone on to start their own sustainability initiatives. Remember when the board thought corporate responsibility was just good PR? Zain shook his head. Now we can't keep up with the demand for our green technology consulting services. We've come a long way from that first solar panel proposal. Amira leaned back against him. Though some things haven't changed. Oh? Like what? Like the way you still leave wet towels on the bathroom floor, and the way you still alphabetize the spice rack, and the way you still look at me like I'm the best business decision you ever made. Zain turned her in his arms. Because you are. You and that crazy arrangement my father cooked up. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sophia entered, clutching her application forms. At 9, she was already showing signs of the leader she would become. Mama, Papa, I know you're busy with CEO stuff, but can you look at my application? I want to make sure it's perfect. Come here, Eureka. Amira patted the couch. Tell us why you want to join the program. Sophia sat between them, her expression serious. I want to learn everything from the ground up like you did, Mama. And then maybe someday I can help other people the way Abuelo helped you. Zain and Amira exchanged proud glances over their daughter's head. She had inherited the best of both of them. Amira's compassion and work ethic, Zain's business instincts and charm. Your mother taught me that the best leaders are the ones who remember where they came from. Zain told his daughter. "And that love is the best foundation for any enterprise." "Is that why you fell in love?" Sophia asked. "Because of business?" "No, mi amor," Amira smiled. "We fell in love because sometimes the heart makes better arrangements than any contract." Later that evening, the entire family gathered for dinner, a weekly tradition that blended Mexican and Arabic cuisines, just as their lives had blended two cultures into something uniquely their own. Karim sat at the head of the table, watching his son lead grace in both Arabic and Spanish, his grandchildren switching effortlessly between three languages. "I've been thinking," he announced as they ate. "The old security cameras are getting outdated. Perhaps it's time to remove them." "Finally," Zain exclaimed, "and replace them with the new environmental monitoring system Sophia designed for her science project." Karim finished with a wink at his granddaughter. Everyone laughed, including Zain. They all knew the cameras would stay. They were part of their story now. Silent witnesses to a love that had grown from obligation into something extraordinary. After dinner, Amira and Zain walked in the garden, where she had once tended flowers as a housekeeper. Their children played nearby, their laughter mixing with the evening breeze. 10 years, Zain mused. "If you could go back to that first day in my father's study, would you make the same choice?" Amira considered the question, looking at all they had built together, the thriving company, the environmental initiatives, their beautiful family. "I would," she said finally, "but not for the same reasons. Then I saw it as a business arrangement, a way to help my mother and get an education. Now I know it was really an arrangement of the heart. We just didn't realize it yet." "Always the romantic," Zain teased, pulling her close. "Says the man who still leaves love notes in my briefcase. Business memos," he corrected with a grin. "Very professional ones." "Of course," she agreed. "Very professional declarations of eternal love and devotion." They watched as Sophia taught her younger siblings how to check the soil pH levels, a skill Amira had once used as a gardener, now part of their children's environmental education. "We didn't just build a business," Amira said softly. "We built a legacy. Of love," Zain added. "Of possibility," she corrected. "We showed that the most powerful changes come from the heart, not the boardroom." As the sun set over the Hassan estate, casting golden light across the solar panels that had started their journey together, Amira and Zain held each other close. Their arranged marriage had evolved into something far more valuable than any business deal. It had become a testament to the power of love to transform not just two people, but an entire corporate culture, a family legacy, and a vision for the future. In his retirement office, Karim watched them on his monitors one last time before switching off the system. Some arrangements, he reflected, were meant to be orchestrated by fate rather than fathers. He had merely opened the door. Love had